I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I am glad to have you listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, whenever it is that you're listening in. Thank you for just being a part of this show. This episode today is sponsored by my friend Kelly Anderson. Kelly sponsors me through my Patreon page, my Patreon platform. Patreon is a place where you can go to lend financial support, monthly financial support to creatives like myself who are looking to do bigger, better things and to just grow the mission that they're involved in. And so I thank Kelly. If you're interested in learning more about Patreon, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com, TWOTIM47.com. Click on the Support Me tab, and it will let you know various ways where you can help me out with what I'm doing here, including prayer, just support, get out there and run, and also there's the possibility of partnering with me financially. So I'm always really grateful for those monthly financial contributions that come in. They just came in recently this month for October, and they, number one, they're encouraging, but obviously they are an added resource that has helped me do some things recently that I never could have done without them, including running the Hokie Half Marathon for the Harvey victims in Texas, partnering with St. Andrew's Church down there, and then now all of a sudden I'll be going to Chicago, or not Chicago, that's Chicago on my mind, all the good folks going out to Chicago this weekend to run the Chicago Marathon, but I'll be going directly south from there, way south, to Houston in January to run the Houston Marathon in this continued effort to rally support for the Harvey victims there in Houston. And I have no idea what will all come to play there and what's going to happen between now and then. But I know God is in the midst of it, and I know that the folks who support me, certainly the folks that support me through Patreon financially, make a lot of things happen and possible. But just also the folks that are listening to support this, that share it, that get involved. I know everybody can't support somebody financially, and I am just A-okay with that. Grateful for any way that you get involved here with 21047. So just a lot of appreciation for everybody. Today's show, I get to actually have a conversation with somebody that I have never talked with before, Mary McManus. I met her through my friend Lachelle Head, who online tagged me in a blog post that Mary wrote, and I became instantly fascinated with her story. This podcast, obviously, is a story of running journeys that express hope and strength. And a lot of times that's expressed in overcoming some sort of personal challenge in our lives and how running has helped us do that. And I like to share those stories to inspire others that there is hope out there. There is strength to be found in overcoming whatever it is that you are battling today. And Mary, my interview with her turned out to be just a beautiful inspiration of exactly that. So I invite you to stay tuned here. I'm going to turn it over to my interview with Mary McManus, and my hope is that you will enjoy that conversation every bit as much as I did. So here we go, Mary McManus. Well, I want to welcome my dear friend, Mary McManus, to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Mary.
Oh, Keith, thank you so much for having me.
Yep, so Mary fits into this theme of so many of the guests that I get to talk with on this show. We met through mutual friends, mutual running friends online, and now today I get the pleasure of actually talking with her, and that's just one of the treasures of getting to do this show. So I'm just so grateful, Mary, to have you on here and to, like you and I were talking ahead of time, to see some of these webs that are weaved come to life.
It is. It's truly amazing to watch this wonderful tapestry.
So shortly after Mary and I met online, Mary sent me a couple of books of hers that tell about this story of her life that we're going to dig into in a small way today, because she has a very big story that she's lived and that she's sharing. But in one of those books, it was a book of poetry. And I don't know if it was the first poem, Mary, but the name of the poem is Running the Race. And when I read it, I really felt like, one, I got to know you very well just through that little bit of poem. And I kind of got this heart for poetry that you have. And just in reading through there, like I said, your story came to life. So what I want to do today is start off this show by reading this poem, Running the Race. And then you and I just dive into a conversation about this poem. That will work for you.
Oh, that is perfect. And by the way, Keith, that was the first poem that I wrote.
Absolutely. Well, that helps. I think that even gives us a better picture of this story. So here is Running the Race. It looks like, Mary, you wrote this in February 2007. So almost, a little over 10 years ago.
Oh, it's hard to believe, but yes, yeah.
So Running the Race. Early summer 1959, my kindergarten year, everyone around me filled with nervous fear. Despite the Salk vaccine, hoped polio would disappear. The polio virus crept right up and knocked me in the rear. Dancing all around the gym, feeling free just like a bird, I dropped to the ground just like a stone, and no one said a word. The pain, it was so searing, the diagnosis even worse. It's polio, the doctor said. He was abrupt and terse. Called one of the lucky ones, I had a mild case. But with the other athletes, I could never keep their pace. Miss Holly, physical therapist, curly hair and a warm, broad smile. It tempered the pain of being apart. To walk, I'd take a while. I always wore those special shoes, the kids they poked and teased. With no support and much abuse with childhood, I wasn't pleased. But put nose to the grindstone and learned all that I could. I couldn't kick a ball, but my grades were always good. Years went by and no more thought to polio did I give. I accepted the limp, everything else, and decided my life I would live. But symptoms of weakness and muscle pain did grow. I kept a stoic face, hoping no one else would know. Life no longer was my own. I struggled through each day, suffered in silence, alone, and afraid tried to keep depression at bay. And with the grace of glorious God, my world had opened wide. I discovered there was a post-polio team, and they were on my side. Sought out paths for healing, and my spirit flew free. For the first time in life, I could truly be me. The chains are gone and possibilities abound. I'm a tree with my roots planted firmly in the ground. Using wheelchair to travel, set limits on what I could do, resulted in joy to realize I could live life anew. Celebrated my body, creaks, groans, and need for a brace, while in my mind I focused on winning a 10K race. I'm now off the sidelines, no need to sit and whine. So much gratitude fills my heart, and love and beauty shine. After all these years, I can join the loving human race. I exceeded all expectations, and now I set the pace.
It was such a joy to hear you read it. You just, oh my goodness, you really captured it in the way you read it. Thank you, Keith.
Oh, well, no, thank you for writing it, for just letting us share in it. So let's talk about that a little bit. So early summer 1959, so you're a kindergartner. And
yes.
So is this when you discovered then that you had polio?
What happened was I literally dropped to the ground. I was in my kindergarten gym class, and without any warning, I dropped to the ground, and the doctor came to the house. I was initially paralyzed from the neck down, and they did a spinal tap at home, and the doctor said, they came back, and it was polio. And my brother had the same vaccine as I did, and they thought I might have gotten it from the vaccine, but it's just one of those things that happened. I'd been playing with my friend whose mother contracted polio the same day I did. She was unvaccinated, and her case was much worse than mine. But that's exactly what happened. I got some feeling back on my right side, some movement back on my right side, but my left side remained paralyzed for a while. And while all of this was happening, my mother was addicted to prescription pain medication. And so she could not or would not or was basically unable to care for me. So I would have to wait until my father or my grandfather came to meet my basic needs. But the amazing thing in all of this, Keith, is that I had a vision. I had a vision of God. I had guardian angel, whatever. However, I don't know. It was just a spiritual presence. And a hand was extended to me from this beautiful being to come into a well bucket. And, you know, you could say it was an out-of-body experience. Basically what happened was, even though I was paralyzed, I got into the bucket and I was reeled up to meet this being. And then I came back. And even though I was in this horrible situation, I had this sense of safety, and I knew that I was going to make it through that horrible mess that I was in.
And so, knowing that, what were some of the first steps then you took as you started to work your way through that? I mean, you come back and you kind of have this renewed hope. I'm just curious where you went from there then.
Well, there was a woman from the March of Dimes who came to the house. And I remember having the thought, even at 5 years old, Kate, that yes, someone has come for me. And she was just this beautiful, loving presence. She got me down on the floor and she did a little assessment. And the whole time my mother was there glaring at me with a cigarette in her mouth. But all I focused on was this loving presence in this woman from the March of Dimes. My dad, who at that time was not alcoholic, he became alcoholic later, but he got me to one of the top physiatrists in Westchester County who was working with polio survivors. And another earth angel came into my life, Miss Holly, who I mentioned in the poem. And she would read Dr. Seuss to me before every painful physical therapy session. She'd pick me up and she'd put me in the chair with the red leather on the seat of the chair. And of course, I couldn't reach, but my legs went straight out. I was in a leg brace. And she was incredible, and she'd have me pick up a Dr. Seuss book, and then she would read it to me, and then during the treatment, she would have me recite Dr. Seuss back to her in tandem. And if there are any Dr. Seuss fans out there, I think we're all Dr. Seuss fans, the poetry that I started writing initially was in the cadence of Dr. Seuss.
Amazing. I'm sitting here thinking, you know, I do a lot of work with, not as much as I used to, but I spent a good portion of the first 15 years of my adult working life working with at-risk youth. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I continue to drive home about that experience today is just how meaningful it is for young folks that are struggling, in your case with polio, but young folks who are struggling with anything, just how important it is to have at least one meaningful relationship in a young person's life. And a lot of times that is in spite of or in place of a parent who isn't there, isn't active for whatever reason. So listening to you talk about the beautiful person from the March of Dimes, and then who was it, Miss Holly, that we talked about?
Yes.
It just strikes me as evidence once again of the importance, because I always use that when I'm talking with folks in the community about how important it is for them to get involved in young people's lives. Mm-hmm. And too many times we don't understand the power in that. We say, why get involved? It's not going to make much difference. And I'm just listening to you, and it's driving home to me, wow. I mean, just how a life changed complete directions because of a couple of people who weren't your parents being that active in your life.
You are absolutely right, Keith. And then I was very blessed to have a school French teacher who also became a very powerful mentor and was just an amazing person and really made a difference in my life between life and death. I mean, truly, because when one finds themselves in this kind of situation, and my dad became alcoholic when I was 8, and he abused me in every imaginable way, to have a mentor who says it's not your fault. And I mean, I couldn't tell her the extent of what was happening, which is often what happens with abused children, as you know, but I was able to tell her enough, and she was able to validate for me. And she would let me spend her free period, talk about how God orchestrates things in our lives. My study hall was her free period, and so she would allow me to come in and meet with her. And, you know, we talked about, well, she was my French teacher. We talked about French. We talked about, you know, not the nitty-gritty details of what was happening, but she just helped me to feel some relief and to have that safe space. So I've been so blessed with Earth Angels. And then I had another physical therapist, Earth Angel, after I was diagnosed with post-polio, which we'll get to shortly, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, so talk to me then about, because it sounds like this post-polio was sort of a transition period where you discovered that you could and would be more active than maybe you thought at that time you would be able to be?
So what happened was now, 11 years ago, this month, October, was when I finally took the phone and reached out for some help. I was not able to swallow well. I was choking during mealtime. My lymph from polio returned. I was very depressed. I was very anxious. I was at the height of my career as a VA social worker, but my body was falling apart. And now as I look back on it, my soul was crying out for healing, as was my body. So after about 10 years of not feeling well, I finally made the phone call to the post-polio clinic at Spalding Rehab. And that's when I discovered that what was happening to me was a result of the initial polio virus. And it's actually quite common among polio survivors that there's a deterioration. It's like an accelerated aging process because nerves that nourish our muscles die off during the initial polio virus. So that accounted for the lymph, the weakness, not to mention the fact, Keith, that I had learned to dissociate from my body. It was just something I kind of lugged around with me because in order to survive the severe abuse that I experienced, I couldn't be in touch with my body. So that whole confluence of events, if you will, resulted in my body shutting down. And so I called the post-polio clinic, and they did a full evaluation. I went through, it's a diagnosis that's ruled out, which means that I had to go through every test imaginable to rule out that there was anything else going on besides, quote unquote, just the post-polio syndrome. And in fact, they said, no, it's very classic. So I went back into a leg brace, and they told me that unfortunately post-polio syndrome is a progressive neuromuscular disease. And so they said to prepare to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And initially I did use the wheelchair at times for grocery shopping when I went traveling, although that became very limited. And they also told me that if I had any hope of stabilizing the symptoms where they were, that I had to quit my job. I was just quote unquote 3 years shy of retirement, where I could collect my full retirement from the VA. And I was panic-stricken initially, as you can imagine, thinking, my God, what is a social worker going to do? And I really had no idea. I was very frightened initially, but I was also relieved because my primary care provider for years told me that this was all psychiatric. And it was. I mean, it was definitely in part, a result of all the trauma I had lived through, but it wasn't psychiatric in the sense of, give her some medicine and send her on her way and she's going to be fine. It was really a whole crisis in my life. So getting back to your question of did I discover that I could be more active, so the first step actually was to become less active and to use energy conservation techniques. And I got a handicap placard and I started winding down my career. But at the same time, I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I got still and I prayed. And at the same time, I started getting this input of things that I actually had already known about the mind-body connection, about Dr. Bernie Slugo, his work, and he'd actually worked with me before when I went through some health crises. And so God was basically infusing me and surrounding me with what I needed, the messages that I needed in order to begin to heal my life. So I went through outpatient rehab and had a lot of differing interventions. And I met another angel, as I mentioned, a physical therapist at Spalding Rehab downtown near the VA clinic where I worked. And she refused to treat me like a polio survivor. And she said, you can and will get stronger. And I kept praying and praying. And so I met her in January. And then in February, it was the dark night of my soul, as well as a very, very cold day here in New England. And my husband was out with the kids, and I got very still. And I just really listened to what God's plan for me was and what were the next steps in my life. There was a part of me, Keith, who didn't know how much longer I had to live. I mean, that's how awful I felt. But I sat down, and this poem just poured out of me. And after this poem poured out of me, poetry, it was like a spigot was turned on in my soul. And I just started imagining myself as healthy and whole. And as I wrote in this poem, in my mind, I imagined myself winning a 10K race. And I'd never run a day in my life, Keith. I mean, physical activity was completely foreign to me. The physical therapist that I worked with, she started me with core strength training. She got me in the gym, and she had me go on the stationary bike and do some elliptical work. And then I reached a plateau, and as you know, with health insurance, they say, okay, you're done. And so on my own, I decided that I was going to hire a personal trainer to see what was possible. And while all of this is going on, I'm writing poems. I'm feverishly writing poems about how will I ever reclaim my life. I want to run unencumbered and free, splashing in the puddles, imagining doing all these things that I'd never been able to do because I was trapped in my body. And so I hired a personal trainer so that was in 2007. Yes, in 2007. And I couldn't even pass her initial assessment, Keith. I couldn't do the cardio assessment. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't do a crunch. And I asked her if there was anything she thought we could do. I couldn't get up off a low toilet seat. And she said to me the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I said, well, do you want to take me on? And she said, oh, you better believe it. And she worked with Parkinson's patients. And she also worked with people who'd never run a marathon before and trained them for Boston. And of course, my thought was, yeah, well, that's all fine and good, but I'll never run the Boston Marathon. I will never run. I don't know why I'm writing about running, but right now I just like to be a little more independent in my life, come out of my leg brace and feel a little better.
Wow. What, well, before I jump ahead, I want to go back because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. You just described this beautiful process of healing that started with what sounds to me like years of putting off reaching out for help. And, you know, I wonder what you would say to people who are battling something right now that is getting them down mentally, emotionally, physically, but are hesitant to make that call you made. And that call it's like I said, it sounds like you put off. What would you say to people who are going through some sort of struggle that may have help out there, but standing in the way of them and that help is just that hesitancy, refusal, nervousness, whatever you want to call it, to make that call?
Well, you know, I just got goosebumps. My hair is just standing on end that you said that, Keith. And yeah, I don't wait. And I even have a poem in my book about a day with destiny. Don't wait. Just look at what happened to me and find the courage. And one of the things, too, Keith, that is so important. I mean, I sort of reached out. I did it with a half-hearted attempt with my primary care provider, but don't stop until the path opens for you. There are many, many, many paths to healing. So many paths to healing, and everybody finds their own. And I truly believe that God will lead you to wherever you need to be. If your heart's desire is, and I believe everybody's heart desire is to heal and to live a full, rich, vibrant life, then just keep going, keep knocking on doors until the right one opens. And also, it's so hard when you're in that situation to have hope. But when we share our stories, and this is why the service that you provide, Keith, through your mission is so important, so people can hear there is hope. I mean, my story is one of many, many, many stories, but you don't want to wait. And I tell people, I've gotten a lot of emails from polio survivors, and, you know, reach out to people. You find a blog and you find somebody on the internet and you say, oh my gosh, you know, I would love to connect with them. And that's the other thing, is that you can find support. You may not be quite ready to dig up and find that strength and courage on your own. So reach out to somebody who's been there. We're all ready and eager to lend a helping hand. And that's also the beauty of the running community, is that we all are there for each other and to support each other and cheer each other on. And when you have that kind of energy of another and know that you don't have to rely on yourself, it makes all the difference in the world. So yes, life is so short and way too short in many ways. And it's just vital that you do it sooner rather than later. And it's scary and it takes courage, but, you know, just have that faith, and also look at healing stories, because they're so powerful. And some people have said to me, oh my gosh, how can you share your story? Why are you such an open book? And I said, because it helps other people. And it's healing for me to share, but then it touches the lives of others. And especially one of the things that I was conditioned to as a survivor was, you don't reach out, you don't talk, you don't tell. And it's very powerful when your life is threatened. But once you're in a safe situation, then by all means, grab on to everything and anybody who can support you, and you'll discover there's a whole world of love and support out there to give you a hand on this journey.
Oh, that's perfect. I just love it. Well, I applaud you for having the courage, first and foremost, because then that set you up, obviously, on a path to healing, But I personally believe our paths are certainly much bigger than whatever personal gain or personal road we travel, but it's how those roads can help others come along in their own path. And that's certainly what this podcast is all about. And this podcast is based on certainly one scripture, 2 Timothy 4:7, but really inspired by just the letters of Paul, who, like you, was just an open book about his struggles. He was an open book about how hard it was to go through some of the things he went through, but he wrote certainly to Timothy, and he wrote to churches because through his struggles, he wanted people to have that hope. He wanted them to know, I have finished my race, right? I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I have kept the faith, no matter how hard things got. And it wasn't just a one-liner he threw out there. It was a one-liner that came with years of stories of hardships that he had been through. So I thank you for keeping, the spirit of Paul alive through your poetry, through sharing your story right here. It's inspirational, Mary.
Thank you, Keith.
The other thing you said in there, which I just want to throw out there before we move on, is I find it sort of on one hand, you talked about having the courage to reach out, but then several times when you were sharing your story, you mentioned be still. You mentioned listen, and I think, and it's an amazing thing to me that I've interviewed countless folks in the last few months on this show. And it is amazing to me the number of them who talk about running as an opportunity to be still, to listen. Mm-hmm. The number of them who talk about what they learned, these messages they get in times of quiet and in a busy world, right? Culture would tell us stay busy, multitask, take on as much as you can. You just don't hear enough people that encourage slow down. Be quiet, be still. And I just find it powerful that so much of your journey became with reach out and then just listen. And then, of course, when you hear things like you need to quit your job, listening means some tough things are coming your way sometimes. So, again, I'm just inspired by your story, Mary, very much so. So you had this dream, this vision of being a runner, even though you weren't a runner. And so it sounds like at some point that dream, that vision, that sort of ridiculous notion that I want to be a runner became a reality. Help me get to that day.
So I was working with my personal trainer, and I was making a lot of gains. I was making incredible gains, and a lot of it came from the poetry and visualizing, and I, in my meditation, I imagined God as my master electrician who was rewiring my body from the polio. And so I was working metaphysically, if you will, doing a lot of quantum healing on my own, and then Janine was helping me to train my body. So we worked from October to February, and I was discovering muscles that I didn't even know existed in the human body. After my first session with her, after the initial assessment, Keith, I wanted to say, no, thank you, but no, thank you. And then, Keith, I had this moment where I said, if I'm going to hurt, I may as well hurt on the side of health. Either way I go, I'm going to be in pain. So let's see what this body can do, which is one of Janine's favorite phrases. So come February, we do the assessment, and my goodness, I could do the assessment, which was an accomplishment in and of itself. And then she started asking me what my next goals were. So I said, oh, my goodness, I want to be able to take a walk outside. I'm out of my leg brace for a good portion of the day. I want to see what it's like to go outside. I was a ballerina before polio struck, and I said, maybe I'll dance again. I'd love to dance again. I'd love to feel what that's like and fire up that muscle memory. And so she's writing feverishly. I want to diversify what I'm doing in my fitness program. She literally had her hand on the doorknob, had her bag on her shoulder, and I said, wait, I have one more goal. And did you ever have, yes, you know this, when something falls out of your mouth and it completely bypasses your mind. I think it happened to you when you declared you were going to run the Houston Marathon.
Yes.
You don't really give it a second thought, right?
Right.
So when it was like, oops, and now it's on social media and it's out there. Well, back then I wasn't on social media. But anyway, I looked at her and I said, I want to run the Boston Marathon for Spalding Rehab. They have a race for rehab team. I can be a charity runner. Now, anybody else, I believe, would have said, well, Mary, I don't think that's a very good idea. I mean, you've never run a day in your life, and, you know, let's take it slow. You can't even walk outside. You're just blah, blah, blah. No. She put down her bags, and she said, you're going to need a pair of running shoes. And I said, yeah. So she came back in the house. Even though our session was over, she told me to go over to Marathon Sports, which is this wonderful running store here in the greater Boston area. And she said, next time we meet, we're going to start indoors. We're really going to beef up your cardio work, and we're going to build up your strength training. And she said, let's do this. And I bought my first pair of running shoes. And then I told my family that night at dinner, my husband and my daughter, my son was here too, but my husband and daughter really clued into my plan. And I said, hey guys, guess what? I have a new health and fitness goal. You know, I'm sure what went through their minds was like, oh, okay, what are you going to do next? And I said, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And they were like, uh-huh. And I said, no, I'm serious. And they were like, okay, we'll do it with you. They were humoring me, Keith. Right. I mean, they're very open about sharing this. They were humoring me. Oh, sure, wink, wink. We'll do it with you, right? So little did they know, the next time Janine came, my daughter I think she was in school at the time, and so she happened to be here, and Janine said, I'm training all of you. And so we started, and running for 1 minute and then walking for 4 minutes, having my heart rate go up over 170 when I first started running. And then we ran for 30 minutes continuously. And then she said, well, you know, you're going to run a 5K race. And so we did a little local race that was runner friendly. The next race I ran was the Marathon Sports 5 miler, which was an evening race. It was hot, which at that time my symptoms were still very much at play. And I stopped in the middle and I started crying, and I said to my husband, my daughter had run ahead of us, I told her to, and I said, I can't do this. I'm out of my mind. What do I think I'm doing? And my husband said to me, you're not going to quit, because if you quit today, you'll never run Boston. And the group at Marathon Sports, they're family to us, Keith, you know, the way running family becomes. And they were actually out on the course, and Allison, one of the store managers, made sure I had water. She told me to dump water on my head. I said, you know, everybody's gone ahead, everybody's finished. She said, we don't care. And they had the sweeper truck actually go on the field to wait for me. And my daughter ran us in, and you would have thought I broke the finisher's tape, Keith. I mean, they gave me such a celebration. And after I finished that race, I knew I could go the distance. I mean, toughing it out on that course, it was hilly, and we didn't know where we were going, and it was just, you know, it was very, very difficult. But my husband wouldn't let me quit, and I wouldn't let me quit. I just had to go through that moment of, oh my God, what am I doing? And then Janine said, well, now you're going to run a 10K. I was like, no. She said, yeah. And so my daughter and I ran the test 10K, and I actually wrote an article called Running with God. It was in Cape Healing Arts magazine. And then our next race was the Hyannis Half Marathon. And that was an incredible experience. It was fleeting, and I got hypothermic, but I got to meet Frank Shorter, the gold medal Olympian, who also recently came out as a survivor of child abuse.
Oh, wow.
From his dad, and he wrote a book about it. And at the time, we didn't know about each other. He knew I was a polio survivor, and he just put both of his hands on my arms. I was shivering and I was about to get sick. And he said, I have no doubt that you are going to finish the Boston Marathon. And the next year when we went back, he and Bill Rogers signed my bib. And I mean, it was an incredible experience. And so we trained through that winter, and I wrote a lot of poetry to get me through
I bet
those
you did.
miles. Oh my God, it was so cold. And I wrote a poem about courage and what I would have missed, because Keith, I'd never gone out in winter because I was told a cautionary tale that as a polio survivor, I was at risk for a fracture. And so they actually, at the post-polio clinic, they gave me a cane with an ice gripper, and they told me to be very careful when you go outside and don't spend that much time outside. And, well, okay, well, how about if I train for Boston? Would that be okay? And I say that tongue-in-cheek because they meant their best. I mean, they really had good intentions, but they don't understand that, you know, there really are no limits when God is involved and when our hearts and our intentions are involved. So we made it through those long runs in the freezing cold. We did have to go indoors for safety for some of the training. And then on April 20th, I got an early start. And after hours and 45 minutes, we went from Hopkinton to Boston through Heartbreak Hill. And it didn't break my heart. Janine actually met us on Heartbreak Hill and went with us to the finish line, but she wouldn't cross the finish line with us because she said that was all ours. And I ran the Boston Marathon in 2009.
That is absolutely amazing. You broke out there on the time. How fast did you all run that, Mary?
So it was 7 hours and 45 minutes.
That is just amazing. And this was yours with your husband and your daughter?
Yes. And we ended up raising $10,535 for Spalding Rehab Hospital.
That is just amazing. So part of me was smiling as you were telling that story, the journey. And I found myself wondering exactly when it was that your husband and your daughter realized their humoring you had really got them into something that was a real deal.
I think probably, I think it was when we did a Charles River run, and I think it was an 8-miler. And we were barking at each other and we were griping at each other. And I think at that moment, the reality that we were doing this together and that I had kind of gotten them into this hit really hard. Because we had a problem with mapping out the route, and there was a problem with foot access to one of the bridges because of construction. And I think it was that day at that 8-miler that we all realized, oh my God, we're really going to do this. And then, of course, it was not only doing it, but it was also the fundraising. And we had a lot of fun doing raising. My daughter did an a cappella concert. We did, the person who fit me with my first pair of running shoes has the brass quintet. He did a benefit concert at the church. And what I found was that people were really enamored with my story. And the fact that my husband and daughter were going to join me on this adventure, I think that also, we were Team McManus. That made a really big difference.
Yeah, I don't think, and our going back and forth, and even in my reading, I don't think I completely knew this connection with your husband and your daughter. I kind of knew, I guess I knew that they had run, but I didn't know how that all came together. That's a fascinating piece of the story. And it's another piece of evidence I told somebody this week that I'm no better, as close as I am to God these days, I'm no better than I've ever been at predicting what he has out in front of me. No matter how close I get with him, I'm no better at figuring out what lays ahead. But I am better than ever at looking in my God rearview mirror and saying, that's what he was doing there. And as you tell this story, just seeing, how your community got involved with the concerts, how the music got involved, how your family got involved. We get on these paths of thinking this is a personal journey that I'm on, but, until you really look back on it, you don't fully get how so many other journeys along the way changed as well. And there were a lot of people with you on
absolutely.
that. The other
those people that we know.
The other powerful thing about that is, and again, one of the things I used to say about working with at-risk kids, and we'd work with them in groups of 10, and this was residential, so we were together all day, every day. But, one of the things I've told people that I learned from that experience is that, because you see people do things on TV that in our minds are, what on earth were they thinking, or how on earth did they come up with that bad idea? But I've said, unless you've lived personally, and then certainly when you put a group of people together, whether it's a group of kids or whether it's a family unit that has no hope, right? If they are without hope, you can talk yourself into some pretty bad ideas. Because in their mind, without any hope, anything starts to sound like a good idea. But the other thing I've discovered is that the flip side is true as well. If you're filled with hope, wow, the kind of good ideas that you can come up with. And so you talked about this physical therapist, and you used the word hope. Once I worked with her, Janine, I think, you said I suddenly, I had hope. And then that hope just spread, right, to your family, to the people around you. And that is really at the heart of this running journey that I'm on now, because I was there with you for all different reasons. But trust me, when I got involved with Meg's Miles, and I loved all the things that the runners were doing, but I wanted to keep doing that at a distance. I didn't want to do any running with them. And then, to suddenly 3 years down the road, run my first marathon. And, what I took away from that experience was, boy, there is just so much in this running journey that can spur us on in our life journey. And most of it just comes from discovering the strength you have, just discovering what you can do if you just have a little bit of belief and a little bit of hope. And like you've referenced several times in this talk, I don't know, the running community is just, I know there's probably other communities out there that do it. I'm sure there are, but just you and I seem to be really involved with this running community. They really do rally around individuals with this idea of hope, this idea of belief, and they just pour it into one another. And then what you see over and over is people running Boston marathons that had no business being out there on paper, right? If you just look at their story, you had no business being out there. But
none whatsoever, Keith.
But the right people poured hope and belief into you, and now, as a result, you've crossed that finish line, and you're pouring hope and belief into so many other people. It's just fascinating to me. It's a God thing. It's awe-inspiring. And man, I have my own chills and goosebumps just talking to you about it.
And, talking about the running community, Keith, in December of 2014, I had a very serious knee injury. I was not cross-training. I ran 9 races in 9 months. It was after the Boston Marathon bombing, and I'd gotten away from running. And from 2011, after my nephew's suicide, I got away from running. I isolated myself, which again, there it is, the worst thing you can do after a tragedy or when you're struggling. But anyway, after 4/15/13, I realized I needed to get back into running. And I did. And in 2014, I just was a running maniac. I was a race maniac. And by December of 2014, I had a very serious knee injury where I wasn't even weight bearing. And again, I got still and I said, okay, God, what's up with this? So I went back to the post-polio clinic for about a minute just to find out what was going on in the knee. I needed an MRI. I made a deal with God. I said, I will go if you will help bring the swelling down so I can walk again. So we had a little chat, and then so I went back and I found out that I had that the knee was beyond repair. Like they couldn't even go in and repair the cartilage. And the doctor said to me, well, we knew you had no gastroc muscle, the calf muscle. It atrophied from polio years ago. On and on it goes. I went to a physical therapist, and this is where it's interesting when you go one path and God says, okay, here. I had a physical therapist who was the absolute opposite of my angel physical therapist, which was quite a shock for me, Keith, because I always had positive experiences with that. She was so awful. She was just so terrible that it was like God was saying, okay, what are you going to do now? And I said, I need to get still. I need help, God. And I was then led to a chiropractor. And it was another one of those crazy meetings that was clearly orchestrated by God. And Dr. Ryan was incredible. And you talk about hope. And he said, you have to read this book by Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's called You Are the Placebo. And he showed me his book. He took a picture of one of the pages that I still have on my refrigerator, Changing Your Body by Thought Alone. And Dr. Joe talks about harnessing the divine intelligence that is within us to start to heal your body through thought, which I've done. I mean, I actually had a breast tumor in the midst of my post-polio diagnosis. I went for a routine mammogram, and they discovered this tumor. And I said, oh, no. I said, okay, I need to meditate, and I need to heal this. And it went away, and through prayer and meditation. And then, so I started on this path, and Ryan said to me, why are you going to set limits? He said, you need to set goals. He said, your body will heal. He said, we'll work together. And he did some taping and he did adjustments and whatnot. And he got me back on the road. And I had finished at the 50, a 5K. And at finish at the 50, there was the Bermuda Marathon booth. And it was on my bucket list, Keith. But then I totally dismissed it. And I said, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to run in Bermuda, so just forget about it. Well, there was God with Anthony and Clarence, who absolutely charmed me and my husband into going back to Bermuda. And they said, the 10K actually will be harder for you than the half. So if you can build your miles back up, mind you, I've not run anything more than a 10K since Boston. They said, come and run the half. And it had been on my bucket list. And then I just, as I said, I'd thrown it away. And so I said, okay. And so I trained and I ran one Bermuda half marathon. And then last year I ran the second because I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder. And then I said, okay, that's it. You know, my body got really beat up that day and a whole lot of things. And I just said, okay, that's it. I don't need to run another Bermuda half. Well, I'm going to take some time off and we'll find a half somewhere else. And all right. So I'm at the Boston Marathon, our friends who do Diamond Athletic medal displays. We were helping them out at their booth. We were getting ready to leave. I was exhausted at the end of the day. They had a very busy booth, which is wonderful. And I said to Tom, we really should go. He said, yeah, we really should go. And we're not leaving, Keith. And we started talking with somebody else. And then the next thing I know, the race director from Bermuda shows up. And he surprised me. And he looked at me and he said, what would it take for you to come back to Bermuda this year? And I said, oh, I'm done. I'm fine, really. Thank you. I had a wonderful time.
Right.
He says, would you like an invitational entry? So how do you say no? I mean, it wasn't just an invitational entry from him. It was definitely an invitation from God. And our daughter, who has given me permission and now speaks freely about the fact that she suffers from depression and PTSD, and she these past few years have been just horrific for her. And she had 6 hospitalizations in the past year, Keith. And talk about hope. She had lost hope. And then at the last minute, I believe God intervened, and she called 911, and we found just an amazing regimen of medication. She's got great therapists. And then we had already decided in April that we were going to run Bermuda again, and she came home and she's living with us, and it was like, okay, well, do you want to run Bermuda? And Bermuda is one of her favorite places, one of her happy places where we have amazing memories from. So this invitational entry that was for me initially is now for Team McManus, and we're reunited again, going the distance. Running is just incredible therapy for her. It's also a great way for us to heal as a family after the journey that she's been through. So it's pretty amazing what this running does, and it's just awe-inspiring to see how God has worked in my life. And I'm really excited about Bermuda Half Marathon, Roman numeral 3, as I call it. So I feel very, very blessed, Keith.
Well, and that is, we're running out of time, and man, did you wrap it up in a great place. You left us at a place where we can all root for you, right? And Bermuda,
yes.
And tell me again when Bermuda number 3 is.
It's the same day as the Houston Marathon, my friend.
Ah, that's right. That's right. We will have big days together. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, that's right. That'll give me something very good to focus on during my race. I'll definitely be listening to this podcast again during that race, as long as it'll take me off time to listen to it multiple times. But
we'll be running together.
That's right. And what an honor. That is very cool. Mary, I am very thankful. You've got so much of part of your story. I have a feeling you'll be one of those folks that I have to bring back and go a different angle and talk a little deeper. But, I appreciate today getting to share the poem Running the Race, and then digging in and realizing that your life is a beautiful example of, running the race. Running, again, to me is just such a metaphor for life. Your life and your story is a beautiful example of why I see that as the case. So thank you for sharing your time, your openness, your story, your family story. It's beautiful. And I really do hope folks will listen and walk away with some renewed hope.
Amen, Keith. I think that is absolutely the perfect way to end on hope. And I want to thank you for your mission, your passion, your purpose, for being who you are. And I also just want to give a shout out to Lachelle for just putting that little blurb on your Facebook feed about my blog. And that's how we came together. And I'm very grateful to her and to God for bringing us together, Keith.
Amen. Absolutely. Amen. Lachelle's, between her and Robin, they partner up to put an awful lot of good ideas into my heart and into my mind. So I am grateful for grateful for them. Now, Lachelle, does continue to try to put the ice bath idea, and I have not fallen for that one yet, but we won't go there. We won't go there. Because I think you're going to...
the next podcast.
Yeah, that's right, because I'm afraid you're going to side with her, and I'm unwilling to hear it.
God bless you, Keith. Thank you for this time today. It was very, very special and very sacred.
Absolutely. You have a great day. We will be cheering you on. I will share links to your blog so folks can read more about you and where to get some of these beautiful books. And God bless you, my friend. You have a great day.
God bless you, Keith. Take care.
Yep.
Well, what an awesome conversation that was with Mary McManus. Like I said, Mary and I had never talked before, and so it was just a pleasure to get to know her, to share in some of her poetry, to share in a life journey that has been all about fighting the good fight, finishing that race, and Mary surely keeps that faith and shared it with us today. So I was just thrilled to have that conversation and look forward to following Mary's journey to Bermuda, what'd she say, Roman numeral number 3. And just also this continued journey of lifting others up, giving them some courage and hope to overcome the challenges in their life, just the way she has continued to battle the role that polio played in her life and just the challenges she has in her family and just the source of hope that she is for that whole family unit. So really glad to know you, Mary, and certainly a thrill to have you on this show. So to all of you listening in, if you want to learn more about what's going on with this podcast series and just other things going on, including my newfound role in going to Houston in January, like I mentioned in the opening, to run the Houston Marathon, I'll certainly be tracking that journey for the next few months and just doing some creative things along the way that I'm not quite sure yet. Just a lot of brainstorming going on right now, but I'm really looking forward to that. Partnering with some friends who will be down there, and then my Patreon supporter, Nicole Williams, and just a real encouragement in my life. Her and her family will be going down there. Robin Larkin. Robin runs the world. She will be running Houston too. Another great supporter of this show and all we're doing. So I really look forward. I'm fired up to share that experience with them down there and just do some good things to bring hope to Houston. So anyway, thank you. You can go to 2tim47.com, TWOTIM47.com, to learn more about all of those efforts and more, and just join into the show. So thank you for listening in today, listening to Mary's story. I hope it touched your life, and I hope you all have great weeks out there, great weekend. Good luck to all of those running Chicago this weekend. I just have so many folks that I've been following their intense training journeys that are going to climax this weekend in Chicago. So I'm really excited to follow those races this weekend. So good luck to all of you. Hope the weather's great up there. Everybody else is just out there running. Have some great runs. If you're not running, get out there and just cheer somebody on to that finish line of their training run or their race. And if you're not interested in running at all, well, thank you for being here, and I encourage you to keep listening in, because there is a place for you. Thank you again for listening in today, and have a great week.
Look how far I've come. I won't quit here, despite